Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Verdi's La Traviata, which I saw yesterday at the Palais Garnier. The conductor was Michele Mariotti, the production was done by Simon Stone, the sets were done by Bob Cousins, the costumes were done by Alice Babbage, the lights were handled by James Farcombe, the videographer was Zach Hine, and the chorus master was Jose Luis Basso. I was really excited to check out this particular production of Traviata because this marked Pretty Yende's role debut as Violetta Valery. How did she fare in this role? You'll find out much later in this review, but first, my thoughts on the production. Overall, I found the production to be really minimalistic in terms of its props, but what it managed to do was also show how ubiquitous and how pervasive social media is. We see that in this particular production of Violetta, which is, surprise, surprise, a modern one, Violetta is a very well-known influencer, fashion model, and a very well-known celebrity who has a very strong following on Instagram, Facebook, all forms of social media, and even that of WhatsApp, especially when she's communicating with her friends. Unfortunately, in spite of her huge following, she has an illness, which is that of cancer, which she has been secretly battling, but she doesn't want to make this so well known in the public. And while I found this approach rather interesting and quite relevant to today's culture of being overly bombarded with social media, I found that there were some things lacking. But I guess it's also to drive home that even though anyone with social media seems to have everything and anything, there's just that one little thing that's lacking. And there's a certain emptiness that is also quite pervasive, combined with that ideal fullness one thinks they might have accomplished with the usage of social media. So that's something that was quite thought-provoking in its own way, even though there were some moments where it kind of deviated from the original libretto, such as with Sempre Libera, or shall we say Violetta's grand scene before we proceed to the next act, in which Violetta finds herself in a kebab stand, even though it was meant for her to be in her room and just singing it all to herself. Maybe it's just to also show that Violetta, in spite of all the fame, all the glitz, and all the glamour she has, she's still very much like every other person with hobbies and a life outside social media. So that's also to kind of drive home the juxtaposition of who Violetta is as a character. And speaking of the costumes, some of them looked really good, especially on Pretty Yende's Violetta, while others looked very kitschy and rather corny to say the least. I mean, the dance scene in Flora's house, it lacked that elegance, and replacing that intended elegance and beauty is this type of kitschiness and this overall corniness that I see in the costume designs, especially when we see Alfredo coming in with a duck mascot head, which I thought looked rather ridiculous, and it basically drove me away from the drama that was about to happen. The same thing can be said about other moments in the opera. There were times that I did feel distracted with the text crawls, and I would have loved to be more focused on how the singers were embodying their characters, but I couldn't help but feel so distracted as to read what on earth is going on with those text crawls via Viber or WhatsApp or Facebook or any type of social media. So overall, I wasn't really a huge fan of the production, but it did have some moments where it combined some bleakness to show that even though Violetta has everything that she wanted, she's still very empty inside. And I guess that's what this production was trying to drive home. And I could definitely understand its intentions. And for that, I salute everyone behind this production for an effort well done. even though it did not really resonate with me. But now we get to the part that I am most excited to talk about, and that is the singers. Starting off with Pretty Yende, I thought she did a laudable job as Violetta. She embodied her very well. She was elegant on stage. She continued to use her charisma and her charm to the greatest of her abilities, and she was able to do an absolutely fine job as a singing actress. And while I loved the tone of her voice, while I loved the clarity that it had, there were a few things that kind of bothered me about how she projected her voice. First of all is the occasional whispery singing. There were times that I felt like she was inaudible when she dug into those whispery moments. And speaking of which, we're talking about the timid use of chest voice. I would love to see and hear Pretty Yende develop her core and her chest voice a lot more, because that is where the meat and the drama all come from. This is what gives Violetta emotion. This is what gives Violetta her signature passion and her signature fear of death and everything about her that makes her an awesome character. But when all is said and done, I could still give a lot of credit to Pretty Yende in terms of her bravery, in terms of her guts, and in terms of her overall valor as a singing actress. So I still have to give my hat off to her. She managed to pull this role off very well, and I would love to see her develop her voice a lot more, because that is a fine instrument right there, and I do not want to hear nor see it go to waste. Benjamin Bernheim was a solid Alfredo. Sure, there were times that I heard a twang in his voice, even though he managed to sing all of his passionate moments with such ringing intensity, and he managed to do an overall laudable job both vocally and theatrically. There were just times I felt like he needed to iron out those problem spots so that he can rise above as a very fine lyric tenor. We have at our disposal all the great lyric tenors of the past, whether they be Beniamino Gigli or Gianni Raimondi or even that of Luciano Pavarotti. He just kind of falls short when it comes to these said lyric tenors because of that twang that he has in his voice, which he needs to fix before any other problems occur. Regardless of that, I still have to give Mr. Bernheim a lot of credit for how he was able to embody Alfredo. He was quite fine in his interpretation. He managed to give him some youthfulness and elegance and charm, and he was an overall fine singing actor, even though he was pretty much outshone by Pretty Yende, to the point where I would like to call this her show, the Pretty Yende show, because she was the one that stole the show from everyone else. Then we have Ludovic Tézier. Now, among the three principals, I felt like he was the one who stood toe-to-toe with Pretty Yende because of his experience and because of how well he was able to produce his voice in a lot of moments. There were times that I noticed a tremolo that was quite present in his voice, and there were times that I also felt that his voice wasn't as round or rich or robust as compared to the other great baritones of the past, such as Lawrence Tibbett, Carlo Galeffi, Apollo Granforte, Gian-Giacomo Guelfi, Cornell McNeil, Matteo Manugera, and many other great baritones that I could name off the top of my head. Regardless of that, Ludovic Tézier managed to do a serviceable job as Giorgio Germont, that he was absolutely on par with Pretty Yende's performance as Violetta. There were even other serviceable singers who managed to embody their parts well, such as Caterina Trottmans, Flora Bervois, who, although has a fine, gorgeous, and lovely stage presence, needs to work on the chest tones, because there were times that her voice didn't really sound fully developed, and I would love to see and hear her develop her voice a lot more, because that would be a voice that could rise and shine everyone else as long as she continues to strengthen those chest tones and really strengthen the core of her voice so that she can rise above as a very fine young superstar. We even have Marion Lebesgue, who sang Anina, who also had a very fine stage presence and also made the best of what this character part has to offer. However, I still feel that she needs to develop her core and her chest voice a lot more if she is to sing a lot of the great roles of the mezzo-soprano repertoire. Julien Dron was a fine and characterful Gaston with his character tenor voice and the way he was able to embody this small yet thankless part. Christian Elmer was in fine shape as Baron Dufault, even though his baritone voice does need a lot more development. Marc Labonnette was a tall and handsome Marquis d'Aubigny, all thanks to that bass baritone voice of his. Thomas Deere was an absolutely soulful and solid Dottore Grenville, even though he does also need to strengthen his bass baritone voice a lot more so it will sound richer, fuller, and a lot heftier. Hence, he needs to develop his chest tones a lot more so that he can reach greater heights. And there were also some equally fine performances by the likes of Luca Sanai as Giuseppe and Socorro as the servant and Olivier Ayol as the commissioner. So overall, the singing was really serviceable when all is said and done. However, I have to give it to Pretty Yende and Ludovic Tézier, who managed to steal the show. And of course, as I stated before, it was nonetheless Pretty Yende's show, as she was able to do a courageous job and managed to muck it in terms of her performance as Violetta Valery. And the conducting done by Michele Mariotti was alright. There were times that I would have loved to hear a little bit more oomph from the orchestra, and there were also times that the second part of the overture was leaning towards the speedy side when it should be pensive and thoughtful and not rushed. And I really think that he should control himself a little bit more with the tempi, even though I thought he did a serviceable job leading the orchestra all the way through, and the chorus and orchestra of the Palais Garnier were in absolutely fine form. So even though I did not love this particular production of Traviata, I still have to give my hat off to the people behind it for making it quite relevant to today's overall bombardment of social media. And I also have to give it to Pretty Yende, who was so courageous in her portrayal as Violetta, as she was able to summon the strength, the courage, and the determination, and the willpower that she needed in order to embody this iconic courtesan. And for those of you who watched this particular performance of Traviata at the Palais Garnier, what'd you think of it? Do you feel like Pretty Yende did a great job as Violetta Valery? Do you feel like someone else stole her thunder? Or do you feel like there was someone that did not hold up very well? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in for another review. So until then, have a great day, everybody.